if Data was in a pile of bolts by the end of the episode. I'm going to hit you with that chair and then leave. No dinner.
And throw myself
anymore.
out the airlock.
No.
Hi, I'm Amelia.
I'm Matt.
And this is Be More Picard, where it's our continuing mission to seek out new ways to improve ourselves by boldly talking about Star Trek.
Today's stardate is 78534.6, and the episode that we're going to be looking at is The Measure of a Man, a courtroom drama that takes us through being professional at work while creating a safe space, listening to your intuitions, and why you should always seek outside advice, because you might just get that date that you've always wanted.
So pour yourself a cup of Earl Grey and let's engage.
So let's get into our warp speed rundown of the episode to remind us what happens, and then we're going to slow back down to impulse power and look at the things that we really want to focus on. So Amelia, if you please, take it away.
The Enterprise swings by remote starbase 173 and we meet Commander Bruce Maddox, who can barely wait to get to Data, who's sniffing around him like a dog with a juicy cybernetic steak. Pronouncing him a lovely bit of kid, Maddox disrespects Data's pronouns and declares Data would be grateful for the opportunity to have his positronic what's-it scattered around his workshop, for science. However, he could not be more wrong, and Data informs him thusly, leaving Brucey to run off crying to his superiors to get his own way. Data still isn't here for this, and says nuh-uh and quits Starfleet. Offences are taken, and the whole thing descends into a makeshift court battle, with Picard's old sweetie pie, Captain Phillips, taking up the role of judge, with Picard on the side of Data, and Riker and his beard forced to side with Maddox. We're now down to a dirty fight for Data's life, and just as it looks like Riker and his beard are taking the edge, Picard steals off for a little conflab with his good old friend Guinan. She sees the situation very differently. Armed with a second wind and a zinger of a defence, Picard swoops in and saves the day, bagging himself a dinner date with the refreshingly age-appropriate Loire, leaving Data to tell Maddox, albeit graciously, that he can kick rocks.
The reason that we do those rundowns just briefly and quickly is just because we don't go into every detail of the story. We like to try and focus on the talking points that we can get out of it.
This is not a place for deep dives.
Into specific bits is because we're trying to look at the things that we can take from it and, lessons that we can apply to our own lives. And something that comes out immediately in this episode, all throughout it, from everybody involved, up and down, is the professionalism that they have when it comes to dealing with very emotional and very difficult situations.
And it's not just the emotion of Data and what's happening to him. There's a lot of different feelings that are floating around here as Starbase 173.
There's, because we've got things that have come up from the past. So, one of the main characters is Philippa Lavoie, who has a bit of a history with Picard, I think it's fair to say. I'll just summarise what their history is briefly. Mm-hmm. When Picard lost the Stargazer, she was the officer who court-martialed him as a way of finding out what happened when they lost it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that he was being prosecuted, they just wanted to investigate what was going on. And they say as much all the way through it that she was essentially just trying to do her job, but through the process of just doing her job and doing it well and doing it right, following the laws and letters of Starfleet, that really annoyed Picard, because he was on the opposing end of what probably felt like quite a personal attack.
Yeah, I should imagine it was quite a personal attack. You've lost the Stargazer. Why? And we were talking about it before this episode started. I hadn't understood the fact that court-martial actually means something completely different. And I thought that it was like a whole trial that had gone on, but actually Star Trek hasn't.
Star Trek kind of got it a little bit. They confuse investigations and court-martials together, and so where they say court-martial, what they really mean is kind of more of an investigation potentially leading to what we would recognise as a court-martial. And whenever you go through these proceedings in real life, they always tend to be carried out quite quickly after disasters, because we want to get it while the memories are fresh in your head, which is understandable. Sure. But that's going to mean that you're having to, like from Picard's perspective, he's having to still deal with the emotional loss of everybody that he's known while reliving these traumatic events again. And that's all coming from one person, the person who's running the court-martial, Lavoie. So his memories and experiences of her are going to be heavily influenced by the emotions that he was experiencing when he created those memories. So it's natural that he's got a kind of like, oh, it's you, the worst time of my life, and it's you that I associate with it. But even with that, and even once you get past do you know what I'd like to do once I've hit you with the chair? He still knows at the heart of it, I don't like you, but I know that you were doing your job.
And I don't like it. I don't like it, but I still like you as a person. He likes her enough to take her to dinner.
Yeah, at the end of it, he gets a date with her because they both stick to the Starfleet principles, and she upholds them just as much as he does. I mean, I would say that she's probably got even more of an idea on it because she's there specifically to administer essentially frontier law.
Yeah, I suppose that from that, he's probably still quite hurt, in a way, kind of bitter, betrayed, because he thought that she would be on his side, but obviously she can't be on his side because she has to be on the side of Starfleet. Something that was actually really quite bruising. So I can see why he's annoyed.
Yes, definitely. But throughout it all, he still remains a champion of the rules and the framework, and keeps that level of professionalism, which is something that I can't do that when I'm in a real job. When I have a real job now. But yeah, I definitely, if I've associated somebody with a memory, or they were there at a particularly stressful time, I really struggle to maintain that level of professionalism. It can take years sometimes for me to kind of get down off that emotional hill, because every time you see that, every time you come into contact with that person, because I find it difficult to let go, I can still I can summon up righteous indignation from 10, 15 years ago if I need to.
That's interesting because that's interesting because from my point of view, having worked with lots of different people in lots of different situations, and having to work with people when they've had to essentially go against you for whatever reason, could just be because they've decided that another way is better and they disagree with you. I've actually found it a lot easier to continue on like that, to take people as you find them on any given day, and to put that aside and go, right, okay, today we've got to do this thing. You're being pleasant with me today. I'm being pleasant with you today. And I find that I'm going to take you as you find you today actually a lot better way of going through it and moving on with people.
I wish I could do that. I admire your ability to be able to do that, because I can't.
Trust again.
It does. You're completely right, and that is what people need to do, because I can identify it when it's happening in myself. Sat across an office, looking at somebody, going, "You." It would, and it's really difficult. But this is, the whole essence of this show is to try and find these examples of characters doing things that we wish that we could emulate, to try and inspire us to be a little better about things ourselves.
And I think Picard is doing that as well. He's taking Captain Loire as he finds her on that given day. And I think if she'd have ruled differently, I don't think he'd have asked her to dinner.
Yes, if Data was in a pile of bolts by the end of the episode, I'm going to hit you with that chair and then leave. No dinner.
And throw myself out the airlock.
No. So let's move on. So we've dealt with the professionalism of Picard and of Loire, and there are multiple examples of that throughout the episode. But an example of where there's somebody who, I don't know whether it comes under professionalism or not, but there is a millennial nightmare then walks onto the bridge, because Admiral Nakamura appears with Maddox in tow and walks up to Picard and says, "I've got something really important to tell you later." Now, if that was me in that no, you come back here now.
And you tell me what that thing is.
What is it? None of it. No, because I'm going to be going like this. Because, I'm not good. I'm not.
No.
Come and say, I've got something, we need to schedule a meeting for later to go through some work things. But first, I want to show me around your amazing ship. Yeah, maybe deal with that. But the whole kind of like, oh yeah, we've got something big to talk about in a bit. No, boss. No, boss. Come in.
No, thank you, boss.
Ready room now. Red alert. Get in. Because, it's just an anxiety nightmare.
Don't you think, though, if it was that important that he would say, ready room now?
Well, again, it just comes back to Picard has been in that, like, think of how many times he's been told kind of like, people are beaming on board and we're going to have this really difficult conversation. One of the main character points of Picard is that he is the master negotiator.
Mm-hmm.
So he's quite used to being sat in rooms waiting for people, waiting for big moments. He's probably got much better control over his resting heart rate than either of us have.
Probably not, no.
And can just bring himself down into and goes like, yeah, fine, we'll deal with that later. It's the compartmentalization
of those things,
which, as we've discussed and we'll keep discussing, I'm useless at. And it would just spill over, and I can't deal with anything else until we've sorted that, whereas he's better at it.
It's something I'm actually working on myself. So I'm starting to be more Picard in that respect by thinking, if it was that important, they would grab me now. If I was in trouble, they would make that very, very clear. So I'm learning actually to take it as a neutral. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It is neutral.
You're right, and actually thinking, but you are correct that he probably knows that he's like, well, he's not come up to me and said, Captain, I need to talk to you because the warp core's about to explode.
Yeah.
Like if Geordie had a problem with the warp core, he wouldn't say, Captain, I need to book in a meeting room with you. If we can get into the conference room at about 3:10, it'll wait until then. He knows that if it's something life and death, it'll deal with it then.
Yeah. As you learn to get on with someone, as you learn to get to know someone, you learn what those things are.
Yeah.
And you learn to just go, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, which gives you the opportunity to be able to start listening to your own intuition.
Yes.
That is definitely something that Data is having to do in this episode.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, Data, he very much goes, something's wrong here. And it's because I don't think he's getting the answers that he wants from this. He's not got a lot of confidence in Commander Maddox here. He's asking questions and Maddox is just going, yeah, not important. I'll work it out when I've got you scattered all over the floor. And he's like, no.
Could we maybe sort it before then?
Yeah.
Because we won't go into the techno babble of Star Trek. But he basically says, what do you need to do if you're going to need to reverse the polarity of the neutron flow? And he goes, we'll work that out later. And Data says, well, that's quite an important
thing there. So it's those little hints along the way that gives him that impression that Maddox actually doesn't really know what he's doing. He knows the theory, but he doesn't actually know the practice. He doesn't have the practical part of it or knowing what the outcome is going to be, because this is completely unknown. And Data twigs, this is going to do something to my memories, and I don't think this is going to be good. And I don't like this. And
I think it's the first example of the whole point of this episode is Data a conscious, independent person? He is what they're trying to figure out. And I truly believe that the episode was, the more I think about this, the more I think that the episode was written to show you all the way through that he is. Because, my iPad here does not have intuition. You tell my iPad something and it goes, all right, I'll deal with it. All right. It doesn't come back to you and go, I'm not 100%. I mean, it might offer an autocorrect or a spelling mistake, but the fact that Data is in the text of the episode, essentially listening to his gut, starts to bring that kind of in that he is a person. I think that one of the reasons that Maddox doesn't see this hits from the name of the episode, which is that Maddox only sees Data as this component, that component, this component there, which is one of Riker's arguments in the summing up at the end of the episode in the courtroom scene, that you can lay out a schematic of Commander Data, and Picard counters this with, yes, and I could do exactly the same with our veins. showing that doesn't hold up just because you're made of parts. We can name all the parts. And because Picard and Riker have spent so much more time with Data and have seen all of these little things of he's listening to his intuition. I'll point out the other examples as we go through.
Yeah.
But they have got the full measure of Data because they have spent time with him. You can't just look at a spec sheet, look at reports, know somebody from, let's take it into a slightly different example. You can't just know somebody through a screen like we're doing here, because you only get a very small portion of it. To get the full measure of somebody, you have to spend that time with someone. And all the members of the crew know that there is no question about this because they've spent the time with Data and they've seen all of these examples.
What I find interesting about it too is that, so you mentioned about Data's nuts and bolts and the human's capillaries and things like that. And that still doesn't make a person because it's more than the sum of its component parts. A person is more than the sum of bones, of muscle, of neurons and capillaries and nerves and all of that. There's something that you can't quite put your finger on it, that we haven't quite been able to capture yet, that makes a person, that makes them unique in who they are. And we see that copied and pasted over with Data. Because Data is more than the sum of those parts.
Yep, definitely. And because he is more than that, he's able to listen to his intuition. And thankfully, he's on a ship that we've talked about this before in our episode on Encounter at Farpoint, and I think also in Fistful of Datas. So please go and check those out after this one. But Data is lucky that he can listen to his intuition and he can speak up, because Picard has created this psychological safe space for all of his bridge crew.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what your problem is, what the time is, where I am. If you've got
something that's worrying you,
if your spidey sense is going off, come and tell me.
You are safe to go and talk to Picard and where his pants live. So that's a really good point that you raised there, Matt, about psychological safety. And it's one that we've pulled through, as we said, from various different episodes. The Data feels that he is safe to talk to Picard. He knows that he could be wrong. He knows that he could well be wrong. But he knows even more, if he doesn't speak up, ultimately he could then end up having things go very differently, very, very wrong. And then that's a betrayal of himself. And I think that this is testament to the non-judgmental space that Picard creates within his crew to be able to say, I think something's wrong. I'm not quite sure if I'm right or not. I don't like this. I don't like this. And Picard says, no problem. Let's have a look into this.
I've got you, bro.
I've got you. Let's have a chat. And as we find out, to his great personal cost.
Well, and that was where I was going to go next with it, was that Picard knows that getting involved in this situation and standing up and supporting one of his bridge officers, like he does so often, is going to end up potentially him coming into conflict with Lavoie again. Somebody that, he might have thought, okay, we've already been through our crap together in the past. You're closed off, you're done. But by supporting Data, he knows that he may end up coming into contact with the brass and the rules again. And she's there at that moment. So it just comes back to his utter levels of being able to compartmentalize different things and go, no, for the good of you, Mr. Data, for the good of you, I can look over this and, we'll get involved.
And I will take Captain Loire as I find her that time.
Yes, because he knows that Data is more than just a set of nuts and bolts, and that he can see that Data being ordered, no matter what he wants, to go and report to Maddox, and then with the whole Data can't resign his commission because his property, he knows, no, this is wrong. I'm getting involved with that. To put my own stuff aside for a moment.
His intuition.
Yes. Excellent link. If we just deal with, because there are several issues that Maddox has with Data. He sees him as a spec sheet. He hasn't got the full measure of him by any stretch of the imagination. And because of this, he is constantly dehumanizing him by using
every way he can.
yes, but specifically by using the wrong pronouns. Now, I know that there's a lot of debate in the world at the moment about pronouns and gender and sex, and we're not going to get too much into that. But what I will just say is that whether Data is actually a person or not, I believe he fully is.
Me too.
Yep. He has expressed an opinion. Could you please refer to me as this? And it is not a hardship for Maddox to do that as well. He said, I am a him. I was designed as a male. As we know from Tasha Yar's daring missions, he is fully, everything
He's
about
fully
him.
functional.
He is, and he is well versed and well programmed.
And that's how he sees himself. That's how he was programmed. That's how he was made. That's how he wants to be referred. And he feels that it's a basic respect to be able to say him, not it. And he has stated that, and he should be respected for it.
And I, as a as a straight white male, I don't have too much skin in the game because it never affects me. So I don't want to pronounce too much on this because I don't have enough information to form a full opinion on it. And that's something that I'm just going to blow my own horn for a second here. I wish more people were able to say, I don't have enough information on this, so I can't, my opinion, I don't think carries as much weight as somebody who is, I always believe you should go to the person who it affects and see what they say. But the one example that I will give of coming into the real life and why I really don't think it should be difficult for Maddox at all, when a woman gets married, she traditionally changes her name and changes her title. Now, ignoring the fact for a moment that women have to change to go to the men's side and all that kind of stuff, everybody accepts that. When her sister married me and took my name, everybody immediately started calling her Mrs. and gave her, and changed her last name to my last name. And nobody has had a problem with that at all.
Not said a word.
And I would argue that changing a title and a last name is more effort than just changing a title or a pronoun or something. So
for sure,
there are so many examples of where we change these things on a daily basis in our real life and nobody bats an eyelid.
And they respect it as well.
Yes, because it's traditional and gone on for a long time. And other ways of changing your pronouns or whatever, they just need the time to marinate, I think. But Maddox dehumanizes him by not choosing his pronouns, and it's really not difficult, Bruce. It's not hard work.
Bruce, sort yourself out. We're talking about respect, and one of the things that I think that Bruce Maddox here is not respecting is Data's feelings about his memories, because he's made the connection that that work that he's going to do with him is potentially going to turn off not just the fact that the content of his memories will be the same, but how he feels about them won't be the same. And here's another interesting point about human memories as well. So you've got two different types of memory. One of them is process, and one of them, I can't remember what it is right now, but there's how you actually view the event as how it actually happened, what happened, the facts, but then also what you feel about them. So that's a very human thing too. And Data is experiencing that, which I don't think we've actually tapped on before. So there's another point as to Data's humanity in that point.
It's another example of him having sentience. He is a man that, like I've said, running all the way through it. The fact that he is worried about the loss of the emotional attachment to the memories, it just shows that he is, he meets every single measure that Maddox lays out and that anybody could lay out, in my opinion.
For what he is. And memories aren't just something that you pull off a shelf and you view them like they are a DVD. They are real things that guide you, because if you do something wrong and you experience a consequence of that action that you've taken, you will remember how you felt, and you're likely then not to do it again. So you're not likely to run through the house and knock over a vase and really pee off your mum, or you're not going to, I don't know, do something that hurts someone else, because you don't want to feel like that and you don't want them to feel you. So you remember the shame, you remember the guilt as to how it feels. So it guides you to do better. And that's why our feelings about our memories are actually just as important about the context of them. But they also are there to guide us and comfort us in that way. So, I mean, Matt, for example, would you want to forget how you felt on the day that you graduated from university or the day that you married my sister?
Which day I married her twice.
Ah!
But no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to forget any of those days. And I mentioned earlier about being able to summon up righteous indignation from 15 years ago, but it goes both ways, because I can also summon up the overall joy that I have of
Yeah.
those memories. You know, if I was to just remember the facts
Of
of
it.
that,
You went to a church.
it was
You said
misty.
some words
Yeah,
in front of a person, and people clapped, and people watched it online.
And then food was consumed, and then we all went to bed. You know, that's quite a cold, clinical way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Or you know, I made my vows to my amazing wife. We had everybody was so excited and happy with us throughout the whole day. We had a brilliant time in the evening, even though it was
You had some of your
lockdown times.
favourite people together.
Yeah, and that all adds to the colour of a memory, rather than just it being a black and white thing. And it gives you know, it gives you the chance to be sentimental about things, like I touched on earlier. Data is being sentimental about Tasha Yar. Picard sees that, and you can see it kind of register in him. It's like, a machine shouldn't be feeling sentimental about an ex-lover. That's not in your programming.
Or a book he's given him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's think about your memories and think about the things that make you you, the things that you treasure, the things that you never want to forget. And one of the other things about it as well is Data, if he goes through that process with Commander Maddox, he's potentially going to go through this traumatic event which is going to affect his memories. And that happens to humans too. It's not just a knock on the head that can affect the content of your memories. It can also affect how you feel about your memories, possibly even wiping them out to the point of feeling nothing about it, which is really interesting. That's another thing that happens to humans, which could happen to Data as well.
It does, and it brings me to something that memories do influence who you are as a person, and all of that great stuff. But I don't. You can't just use memories as part of a definition of personhood, because it is possible to lose your memories. So just to kind of smash two things together here, Immanuel Kant said, you know, personhood persists. And what I think that he was trying to get at was we can have degenerative brain conditions where you lose your memories, you lose access to those things, but you're still a person. You still have the inalienable rights of personhood, you know, being treated with decency and respect and all of that kind of stuff. And something that I think especially people of our generation tend to forget is that, and why this is such an important topic, and why it was something that we wanted to bring into this episode, was within our mothers' lifetimes, women were not given full rights of being, you know, weren't given the full protections of personhood in America, and to a point in the UK as well.
In this country too.
You couldn't open a credit card until the 80s or something.
It was 1976, and you had to have a male guarantor before that. So you had to have a man say, no, she's good for it.
Yeah, we're not here for man bashing. This is not.
No, absolutely not. But I opened up my credit card when I was 18 years old at my freshers at university. Not a problem. And that's a freedom that at 18 years old, my mother didn't have.
It is. Now, I opened up my first credit card at 18 and wished that my mum had been over me, and I go, no, you don't need it, Matthew, because that was the start of a slippery slope that took a long time to deal with.
a slippery slope. But tell you what,
So actually, maybe I did need a man.
Possibly.
I need an adult.
No. I mean, that credit card absolutely saved my bacon a lot of times, because when I was a student, I was poor, really, really poor. So that kept me fed. That made sure I was able to afford the bus to get to university. That meant that I was able to afford books. So no, I look back on that very, very fondly and feel the gratitude that I was able to do that. See, memory and feeling about it.
Different feelings ascribed to essentially, broadly, the same memory of getting financial freedom and access when we were younger, because you have the right to be able to do that now. And just to bring it back to what I was trying to say, we forget that so many of these things that we take for granted, and I think this is why they were dealing with this in this episode in the 80s, was it wasn't taken for granted back then. There was still the potential for Supreme Court challenges, challenging all of these rulings. And something that I think Star Trek it kind of encourages to do is to think about the debate behind things, which again is something that in this country we don't do very well at that kind of stuff. Debating societies are a lot more standard in America. And what was because you did some looking up into
I did
into how, just to give you so until I kind of got to about 16, 17 and started watching this kind of stuff, the idea of arguing for a point that you didn't believe in was complete. I couldn't. Why on earth would you do that? Why would you put the time and the effort into doing it? Now, Riker has to do that in this episode, and his stakes are quite a lot more than just, well, it's what we need for the debating team. So, because if you don't do it, Data will die immediately. Do you want him to die now or possibly die later? But you've got to try and get him.
Yeah. Well, die emotionally or die with life as he knows it. Yeah.
Yes. But over here, it's just, in state schools at least, it's just not a thing.
No.
I think it's more
It's more in private schools. So I believe it's 53% of UK private schools actually include debating in there, which I then think to an extent, and I don't know if you agree on this, whether it. So the whole fact of putting a debate on an issue then drills it down to an unemotional one. Rather than actually seeing the real people behind it. So it becomes something that's just academic. It's not real. And some of the things that we forget with this, and I think this is one of the points that brings in about Data here, is this is not an academic point. This is real. And this is someone's life. And this is someone's feelings that are being... Basically, someone is being completely disregarded because it's all been drilled down to an academic point, and it's Commander Maddox that has brought this down to an academic point. So you have these people who are debating over things that are basically an academic point, forgetting that there's real people behind this who are going to suffer as a result of this.
Definitely. And so... And that kind of raises the tension levels in the courtroom. And if you do boil this down to, in fact, exactly like you've just said, if you boil this argument down to those salient points, he is made of parts. Somebody designed him, despite the fact that nobody has been able to design anything since.
No.
But,
and even Noonien Sung hasn't been able to do it.
Exactly.
Since he made law.
Yeah. So, and when you're dealing in a courtroom and in a debate setting, it does come down to things like that. And this is where Picard pulls out one of his genius moves. He can see that he's losing this and that things are going wrong, and he's tried his best. And he can't see a way that he can win the case. And this is where he does the thing that I wish it was something that people were better at doing. He says, I need to go and think and talk about this with somebody else, somebody who's not involved. I need a completely different perspective to try and refresh myself to get a new argument. And that's where he nips off to 10 forward, and in comes Guinan. And well,
the legend,
the
woman, the legend.
Yes, I I loved every time that Guinan came into an episode because, we're going to get some truth right now. We're going to get some
We're
good
not just going to
ideas.
get some truth, we're going to get some good ideas. We're going to get an idea that's completely different to Star Trek. And we're going to see someone who is different to anything that we have ever known. Someone who we can't even understand because we don't even know what real species Guinan really is, because she seems to be older than the sun.
Yes. So Picard knows that I have this ultimate other perspective downstairs.
And she's someone who he respects, so it's not just a case of, so Picard could go down to his ready room, he could go down to the bridge and he could pick Worf, he could pick Geordi, he could pick, well, he can't pick Riker, but he could pick any other person on that bridge who he could have a chat with. Oh, even, Councillor Troy, he could have a chat with them. But they know him, and they know him in that capacity, and they know him within as the captain. So they possibly could agree with him. They know what he's going to say, and they might assume about what he's going to say and what he wants to hear.
Well, yes, because for the last few years at least, it seems that crew has travelled together, so they won't have had, even though he's got all those amazingly intelligent people, the last few years, all their experiences have been shaped together. Now, as we've gone through ourselves, you can go through the same experience and have different emotional recollections
and
of it.
See it differently from different points of view.
But still, for a while, the crew have gone through everything together, and that's great, and that's bonded them, and that's given them the teamwork and everything. But so there's not been a huge amount of outside influence into his bridge crew, which is where Guinan comes into it, because she has that outside influence. There have been studies I forget where it was. It was in I'll try and link the book or something in the comments, but there's definitely been studies done about if you give groups of 4 people a task to do, if you have a group of 4 friends versus a group of 3 friends and 1 random person who they've got no idea about it, the group with the random win almost every single time.
I love that.
Because you've got that, just that small idea of it from a different perspective. And I think like one of the best examples actually is I came up with the idea for what we're doing here right now and tried to pitch it to my wife, who's not a Star Trek fan, and was like, this is useless. But thankfully, I know where there's another one of you who does do Star Trek. And I called you up, gave you, and said, I've had this idea and I need another perspective on it, because I need to not just say it out loud. I need somebody who knows Star Trek
and bounce back off.
Yes, to give me my ideas. And within 30 seconds, the stuff that just like fell out of your head, where I was sat there, I'd never thought. And within that first 30 seconds, you'd improved my idea. You'd given me a load of extra ideas, and I changed my idea. So we were like, because initially this was just going to be me in a script, kind of going like, this is why I think Jean-Luc's brilliant. And it became very apparent very quickly that it was like, no, I need you on board with this.
No.
Because I knew that I needed a slightly outside opinion.
Well, it's not just the outside opinion of the fact that it's someone outside of you. My experience of Star Trek has been completely different to Matt's. So Matt came at this, he was watching it at the time when he was this big, and it was new at the time, and he was much younger. Whereas
I wasn't watching this episode at the time. I was 2, I think, when this episode came out.
Wow.
Maybe 3. Sorry.
Yeah. So you were just a dot.
I was small.
You were small. So he was watching it in the 90s when it was having reruns. I watched it in this decade, actually. So I didn't come to Star Trek until I was much older, and I had the perspective of, the whole passage of time. I could compare, I could think about what things were like in the 90s, and I could think about what things were like now. Obviously, I'm female. I've had a very different life experience to Matt. And also, I was watching it on Netflix rather than having to wait for the next week for the next episode.
Oh God, kids
They've got it
I,
so easy.
I,
They don't have to
am,
watch the same episode over and over again because
I
when
am
you
becoming such an old man, and not just in my grey hair, but like kids, they don't know. Yeah, having to wait for or borrowing the tape off your uncle that had got 4 episodes on it, and when he'd recorded it, he'd press stop during the advert breaks.
Legend.
That was incredible.
Legend. What a legend. So we used to, when we'd have like TV, there'd be adverts. So that would be the time where you go and make a cup of tea, or you'd go to the toilet, and maybe, your sister would have to shout, it's on again. And you would run, inevitably end up stubbing your toe on the corner of a wall somewhere. So you'd then be screaming and like hopping back to your seat. Maybe you'd spill your tea. It was a mess. And we don't have to live like that anymore. And you can also binge watch as well. Old Man Shouts at Cloud.
Old Man Shouts at Cloud.
So one of the points that I want to make about Guinan is that she doesn't actually report to Picard at all. And so she's someone who's independent. She can speak her mind. She can speak to him, as a friend. There is no chain of command within their conversations, and I think that that's an important point as to how she raises things with him as well and gives him that perspective. And she's able to say there's a link here.
Yeah, and as we find out from the Picard show, she knows him better than he knows himself.
Yes.
Anyway, so she knows kind of like how to guide him, and that's how she doesn't slow walk him, but she brings him to the realization of, so what Maddox wants to do is to take Data apart to create more of him, and then they can be a working subservient class. We kind of did something like that before. We took a whole group of people and made them all do the rubbish jobs that people didn't want to do. And what was that called, Jean-Luc? What was it? That was slavery. I think it's not a hot take to say that slavery bad.
And I think probably the reason why he didn't think about this in the first instance is that things have been so good and so peaceful. Obviously not out on the frontier. There's wars and all that happening. But in their home life, in this utopian Star Trek universe, apart from the Orions, that doesn't really happen. And they kind of might end up realizing that they're slow walking into this situation because it's been so long, they've forgotten about it. There's not people who remember the pain of it to remind them about what's happening. So Guinan raising that point with him then makes him go, oh.
There's never this is the moment where we, find that all of a sudden we're
in World War III.
We're instituting slavery now. Yep. It's lots of little actions that all take you down the road. And I think the point that you made about there aren't people there to remember them, whereas she, for many different reasons,
because she is as old as the sun.
Yeah, she will have been around, and we know that she was on Earth for some of her time as well. So it's conceivable that she was around when her skin colour would have been a problem for her on
Definitely.
Earth.
And Geordie, isn't going to remember being Kunta Kinte.
So once Picard comes back from the bar and he's had a good chat with Guinan, and she said, mate, this is slavery that you're creating here. He wins the day, wins the court case. Data is a person, as I've been saying all along. And everybody's happy, and they go off and have a party about it. And this is, even after the court case, there are still more instances of where Data is a person and deserves all of this.
And he's better than all of us.
And that is when...
Better than you.
Yeah, definitely. And that is where he decides that he needs to go and speak to Riker.
Because Riker has stolen himself off into a corner. He's feeling very sorry about himself right now. And Data is a little bit unsure as to for why. So Data's like, so Riker, what's going on here? You seem sad. Are you sad because you lost? And he comes at it from a curiosity thing rather than are you sorry because you lost? He's not. He's just genuinely curious because he doesn't understand why Riker is sad. And Riker says, I feel really, really bad because I had to argue against you, and I don't deserve to be out here. I don't deserve to be out there partying with everybody because I could have ended up getting you sold for parts.
Mm-hmm.
And Data is completely baffled by this and goes, no, actually. He looks at things with such a positive take and goes, no, fam, actually, you're good. You gave me the opportunity to prove this in court, because if Riker hadn't have done it, Captain Noir was very, very clear that she would rule against Data.
Yeah, do this or he dies now. And yeah, Riker is kind of struggling to wrestle with that. And hopefully this will be one of the things that allows him to be more Picard later on down the line, is going through this experience of having to argue against, essentially argue that his friend should be killed.
Not killed, powered down.
Yeah, I think the implication is that when they put him back together, he might not be exactly the same because Maddox doesn't understand what screwdriver he needs for a certain point.
It's not Phillips.
Yeah, and because he doesn't have as much emotion as the rest of us, he's able to look at the facts and forgive very quickly, and kind of emotionally square it all off with himself, whereas Riker is not able to do that. It's all very well and good saying that we need to be able to forgive people and accept consequences and, you know, view the situations as a whole, but often when you're immediately in it or in the aftermath of it afterwards,
you're in your feelings.
Yeah, you can need some time to just sit and process and think about what you're going to do. I know that I do my best thinking and my best processing in the bath. When we made the decision to get a dog, I said, I'll think about it. Let me go and have a thinking bath. And Riker here is, you know, potentially having a bit of a thinking sulk. And again, I know all about that. And because you can't just do these things immediately, it can take some time.
And sometimes you can know that it's the right thing to do. You know that Riker was doing it because, you know, he was compelled to, but you can still have that feeling of he betrayed me. So you can have that conflict between what you feel and what you know, and knowing what you know, but still feeling what you feel. Try and say that fast after a few drinks. And I believe it's actually called something called the wise mind. So you know what you're feeling is actually not correct, the actual facts of the situation, but your wise mind is telling you, actually it is the thing that's correct. So you're feeling, your heart and your head are kind of almost catching up with one another.
So let's start to look at the things that we can take from this episode to be more Picard and to definitely be more Data. The first thing is, don't freak out when your boss wants to talk to you. It will be all right.
The second thing is to speak up if something doesn't feel right, even if you're wrong.
If you're the person that has something spoken up to you, believe people when they tell you something and be supportive whenever you get the chance.
Respect pronouns.
Don't completely burn your bridges. You might just get that date that you've always wanted. So if you get the opportunity to be more Picard, or in this case, be more Data,
make it so.
I want to leave it there because
That's fine.
If I'm not careful, I will end up just going like, and that's how we got Trump.
Nice jumper. Thanks, your mum knitted it.
So let's start to look at the ways that we... Perfect. Woo! Well done. Well done. Off to a good start.
Off to the pub.